I'm Lembit Öpik, and I want to report back on my visit to none other than the place behind me there. That's Limassol in Cyprus, apparently part of the front line of the war which is going on in the Middle East. And joining me today, as always, on a Wednesday, is Nick Buckley.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring.
You got it work. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember what you're doing. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Welcome on all. Lembit Öpik here on Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV. Thanks very much for joining us. And I am reporting back on the place you see behind me. I was in Limassol in Cyprus. That's the place you see. And it really is as beautiful as it looks. 20 Celsius. People seem to be fairly happy, but they're in a war zone. There was no doubt about that. I'll talk about this a little bit with Nick Buckley MBE, who joins us today. The question I'm prompting is, Donald Trump got us into a war. How do we get out of it? And what is the long-term objective? And is there really a benefit to having started it in the first place? I'll just make two observations, then we'll bring Nick in. First of all, it seems to me the objectives aren't clear. Donald Trump had some regime change idea, and then it altered to something else. But the problem is, if you're not clear about why you enter a war, there's a real danger that you're going to not be able to get out of it either. The second observation I make is that there is a high degree of normality in many places which are being affected by the war. And the picture you see there is about from an airbase which belongs to the United Kingdom, and apparently was bombed too. So on this second point, my feeling is people just don't want to be in that war zone. And with a bay full of ships, you can see it's really having an effect. But enough of my opinions. Let's get Nick Buckley in. Nick, good to see you. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
Not good. I have to say, I feel rough. I feel tired. I must be getting old. I don't know if it's the food. I won't besmirch the airline because I can't be sure about that, or tiredness, or just because I got to slow down. I'm not sure. Maybe it was because it was a 5-hour flight back from Cyprus, and there was a certain amount of stress involved in that because you're thinking you're rather vulnerable in an A320 Airbus.
Yeah.
If somebody tries to take a shot at it. So I had that passing concern. But anyway, I'm back now. Have you been to Cyprus?
Been many times. I've actually stayed twice on the army base in Cyprus. That's right on the border between North and South. My friend was part of GCHQ and he was based there in a family house. So I went over twice to see him.
Well, that was. And what did you make of it? Do you like it?
I think Cyprus was lovely. People are lovely. It was the nicest food I've had in Greece. And I've been to Cyprus now maybe 4 or 5 times. The food's just amazing. It's a lovely place.
Pricey. I think a lot of people agree with you. And it wasn't a cheap place to be. But I have to say the seafood was second to none.
It was cheap when I went, but I've not been now for at least 25 years.
Well, this is the first time I've been there now in 20 years myself. No. But it's beautiful. And there we are. That's the promenade in Limassol. And it really is like that. It's clean and it's positive. The water was too cold to swim in, but it was really, really nice. And I have to say, I can see why people retire there, especially if you've got arthritis, because it's a far more agreeable location. NYX was the hotel. I can't recommend it highly enough. Absolutely superb. So that's what I was doing, but I was there on business. I wasn't there on holiday. And meanwhile, the bombs were flying, and this is what I want to talk with you about. I think that is Tehran. What do you make of the first week or so of this war?
Oh, for me, it's very similar to the first Iraq war, where we only see it on TV. We're beginning to think it's just a video game or a TV movie because it doesn't seem to be affecting us. And we're watching it and we're going, oh, that's interesting. Drones, oh, that's clever. But the people I'm speaking to, the average people on the street, have no concept that it's a real war. And these types of war in this area can escalate.
That's the big problem. My biggest single concern is the escalation. Also, 1,400 people dead in Iran already. I'd be willing to bet a fairly large number of those people were civilians. When you have this mass scale bombing and almost this bragging about it, that's a dangerous combination. I think that as soon as you start dropping bombs, something's failed along the way. What's Donald Trump's mission objective?
Regime change to a pro-American government that will disband their nuclear ambition. That's the only aim he has.
You're fairly sure about that then?
Yeah. Well, what he tells his people, what he tells the world, what he talks about on TV can be completely different. But all that is propaganda, spin and PR. He wants a pro-American regime in Tehran. That's what the Americans have always wanted since '79.
He's not going to get that, though, is he? How's he going to get a pro-American regime?
He may not reach that. So his secondary goal is to make sure they have to abandon their nuclear ambitions. Hence why they're going to bomb the crap out of Iran. We since the Second World War, we seem to think, and especially technology taken off, we think we can fight wars now like video games, where, oh, we've got this special bomb that will go down someone's chimney and it'll only kill the 3 bad men inside. Yeah. War's not like that. If you want to win a war, you have to be prepared to kill every single one of them, all of them. If you want to win a war, you've got to be prepared to do that, because if you're not prepared to do that, you will lose. And that's why many of the conflicts around the world and all the wars we've been involved in since the Second World War, none of them have really ever ended. We've only put a sticking plaster on them because we've got to a stage now in the West where we're not prepared to kill people. If you're not prepared to kill people, don't get involved in wars.
No, I think actually, I have to say I'm quite pleased. If you're right, I'd rather the people in all those buildings behind me weren't exposed to the threat of bombing, and to some extent they are. I'd rather, I suppose I'm becoming something of a pacifist as I get older, to be honest with you, Nick. And certainly when I was there in Limassol, they were nervously talking about it. They didn't feel an immediate danger, but they were nervously talking about it. And that was the interesting thing. But dropping bombs on the promenade is, in my view, totally futile. And what worries me is as they run out of targets, they'll become more and more willing to take risks. And if you're bombing the hell out of a country, I just don't think that makes it likely that country's going to go, okay, we agree with you now. They're not going to do that.
It worked in Germany and Japan.
Yes, but it was total war. Germany was absolutely annihilated.
Yep.
And so was Japan.
And that's the lessons from that if you want to win a war, you have to fight a total war. You can't fight them to a certain point and then go, oh, Queensberry rules kick in now. So we're not going to bomb you here. We're not going to kill you there. And we've actually won now. We're not going to hang you as, traitors or hang you as war criminals. We're going to let you live your life and we're going to let someone else take over the country. And do you know what? They're even worse than the people we just kicked out. This is why we have all these problems. First of all, we shouldn't be messing in other people's countries. Let's look at the 1979 Iran revolution. The West were involved in that. Of course they were. The West were involved in keeping Saddam Hussein in power for many decades. And then we, toppled him. The West keep messing around in other people's countries. And the lesson we don't learn is we keep making things worse. We should let people in those countries sort themselves out. And if that entails them massacring each other, then so be it. because Western Europe, we massacred each other for many centuries until we got peace, until we got to a stage where our countries said to each other, can we all just stop massacring each other and let's start working together? That wasn't imposed upon us. That's because eventually we got sick of the bloodshed, and some of these countries have to get to that point themselves.
That's a direct and quite a almost abrasive interpretation. But let's look at what Britain could be doing. HMS Dragon there. I think that's HMS Dragon. It's a tremendously ugly looking ship in my view. Which wasn't ready. They did apparently do a very quick job of improving it. A friend, I've tweeted this. A friend of mine said it should be called the Eternal Flame because it never goes out.
Yeah.
But actually, it's steaming off to the Mediterranean to make a trivial contribution, I imagine. By the time it gets there, according to Donald Trump, on the good days, Donald Trump says it'll all be over. But it's going there. And they've got this really pedantic point which is made. Oh, it's all to do with defensive measures. I can't see the point. I can't see the rationale when Britain's allowing America to bomb Iran from our territory. That's not defensive, is it?
That's just political spin, isn't it? Keir Starmer, again, is trapped between a rock and a hard place. He's trapped between appeasing the Americans, who are the world power, who we rely on for trade, who Keir Starmer is still trying to brown nose, and he's also then trapped between his backbenchers, his Muslim voters, his far left voters, who hate America, who hate war, and see this as another attack on Islam. So he's trapped. He doesn't know what to do for the best.
Yeah.
But our armed forces have been hollowed out over many decades by many different governments, because those leaders weren't real leaders. They were politicians, and they thought, since the Second World War ended, they've all thought, we live in a safe world now. The Western world is safe. We're never going to have wars. We don't need all this infrastructure. We don't need all these armies and planes and tanks and stuff like that, because we're untouchable. And we may be untouchable at this moment in time, Western Europe, but you can't be untouchable and then start messing around in other people's countries, because then you do become touchable. So we're not a world power. You know, we're a second-class military force now. We've had to send, Spain have had to send ships to Cyprus to help protect our airbase. The Spanish, we're relying on the Spanish to protect our airbase in Cyprus. That's unheard of.
Yeah, it does seem to me that Britain, which was once the mightiest seafaring power in the world, indeed, that's how it managed its empire, has fallen from military grace. I'm not 100% sure I'm upset about it, because if you can't fight wars, you're less likely to be involved in them. Tell that to Tony Blair.
Well, also, if you can't fight wars, you're more likely to be invaded.
Yeah, but who's going to invade us, really? France?
At this moment in time, no one. But we don't know what's down the line. A decade from now, 2 decades from now, we keep sending a signal around the world that we are weak and pathetic. That's all we portray now. We're weak and pathetic, and more dangerous countries around the world are looking at us going, you're just weak and pathetic. What that leads to, I don't know.
Well, it leads to a lot of bombing going on by the Americans, which we don't have any say in. I have major issues with. I know a lot of Iranians, and most Iranians are peace loving. They don't hate the West. In fact,
they support the West.
Yeah, well, a lot of Iranians in Iran would love to do business with the West. Yeah, that would be the preferred option.
Iran is one of the strangest countries in that region for this particular reason. Across that region, nearly all the governments are pro-American, but yet their people are anti-American. Iran is the only country where the government is anti-American and the vast majority of the people are pro-American and pro-Western. It stands out. It's an odd country in that region of the Middle East.
Yeah, the Iranians I've worked with, and I've done a lot of broadcasting with the Iranians, was very polite, didn't try to censor things. In fact, I tended to feel more liberty there than I did with British mainstream media. But that's as may be. 90 million Iranians, seeing a whole lot of bombing happening over their heads. What I'm worried about is that we're actually getting the opposite result, because leaving aside all the oil problems and everything else, the reality is if you see this out your window, an explosion like that in a city which has got fairly normal people in it, they're not all Muslim clerics, they're accountants and housewives and children going to school. It kind of reinforces the view that people might have about the West, that might is right.
No, absolutely, of course, and it'll turn people against the West. Of course it will. If America decided the best policy for them was to bomb Manchester because of all the authoritarian laws and our anti-free speech laws, and they accidentally killed my family, there's a very good chance I would hate Americans. So when you're killing people, you're killing people's family and friends and bombing their cities. Some of those people will end up hating the people doing the bombing. It's common sense.
Yeah, and just imagine seeing these huge explosions. I saw something that 4,000 bombs had been dropped or more onto Iran already. That's a whole lot of damage. And even leaving aside the monetary side of it, the human side, the human cost must be huge. And I just don't buy this idea that just because somebody is involved in Iranian politics, they must be bad. Just take a look at our own politics in Britain right now. And so looking ahead, how does this play out?
In two ways. So first, we need to work out why the Americans are doing this. We know what they want, or I think I know what they want, but why do they care? Why are they doing it? And I think Trump is setting the stage for a dominant China. I think he realizes, and they've realized now and admitted to themselves, China is soon to be a world military power. And he's now realizing I've probably got a decade. America's got a decade left to move some pieces around the world that will benefit America. That's why he's done what he's done in Venezuela. That's why he wants Greenland. And that's why he intends to knock out the threat of Iran while they can. Because 10 years from now, they may not be able to do anything. There may be a Cold War with China, just like the old Cold War with Russia, where they use proxies to fight the Cold War, and they can't do anything overtly because that will attract conflict from the other world power. So I think he's moving his chess pieces around, ready for a dominant China. The war itself, we've seen it so many times, unintended consequences. I'm not clever enough to predict the unintended consequences of this. Just like we saw in Iraq. Do you know what? We're going to go into Iraq. We're going to overthrow a really bad man called Saddam Hussein. The people will celebrate us, will be heroes, and will get their oil. Oh, how did that work out? Decades of civil war, the creation of ISIS, over 1 million Iraqi civilians dying in bombs, and Shias fighting Sunnis, fighting Kurds, and it's the madness spread across the Middle East. We never predicted that. We've seen the same in Syria, the same in Libya. If it wasn't for Libya, we wouldn't have the migrant crisis coming across Europe. It was only because Libya fell and Colonel Gaddafi went that all the gangs now are using Libya as the staging point for the invasion of Europe. So what will be the unintended consequences of Iran? I have no idea, but I can guarantee one thing: there will be unintended consequences.
Meanwhile, whatever happened to the Ukraine war? And there you go, there's the three amigos.
Yeah.
That seems to have gone off the boil, perhaps because they recognize they can't win.
Well, yeah, not only can they not win, it's also a boring war now as well, that our press are not interested in. And nobody wants this going on anymore now. But those world leaders, the photo on screen now, they're committed to this, as in their reputation is committed to not back down, not to give up, and not to surrender, and not to sign peace deals. So these three people now don't care. I mean, I'm not being flippant now. They don't care about the people of Ukraine. It's all about them, their reputations, their name in history books. If they cared about people and lives, they would be pursuing peace. They would be trying to get the best deal they possibly can. Because at the moment, there is no peace deal and people are still dying. And everybody sort of agrees now there's no end to this war. There is no end. It's it's basically a stalemate as long as the West keep pumping money into it.
The Ukraine situation is interesting because with the Iran situation also, a fundamental law of war is being broken, fighting on two fronts. Never fight on two fronts. And that's what's happening. And Zelensky's bleating along, while, of course, the irony is Russia is making a nice packet now with the oil revenues.
Yeah.
And in a strange, almost perverse twist, America's now relaxed the sanctions on Russian oil so Russia can sell more oil. This is the crazy thing.
Yeah, exactly. Because Ukraine now is yesterday's war. No one cares anymore now. They just don't want to lose face, but they don't care. So therefore, they will relax sanctions because at the moment, Iran's priority. It just goes to show how fickle these politicians are. And these wars. If the Ukraine war was all about the West and saving the West and saving democracy and saving our freedom from the evil Russians, then no other war then would allow the Americans to reduce sanctions on Russians because Russians are a threat to the West. It just goes to prove Russians are not a threat to the West. I
tend to agree with you. Zelensky won't be shaking too many hands in Washington right now, I don't think. How long is this war going to continue? The Iran one?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how successful their strategy is going to be. I can't see Americans sending boots on the ground into Iran. I don't think American people will have that. I don't think Trump knows that'll be a disaster. I think they're looking at bomb the crap out of them, out of all the facilities, bomb them back to the Stone Age, and at least then we've got another 20, 30 years of not worrying about Iran. I think that's what they're going to do. But then Iran's already got their strategy, which is we can't beat the Americans, but we'll isolate them by bombing their friends across the area, including Cyprus. Wait until the next phase of this, which will be we're going to send terrorists across the West to blow themselves up in restaurants, in churches, in cathedrals, in parliaments. The Iranians, as we all know, have funded so much terrorism around the world that I would imagine that's their next phase in this. We can't damage the UK, we can't damage France or whoever's supporting Americans, but we can send someone with a suicide vest right into the heart of your capital and take you out there. That'll be the next phase of this war.
I perhaps have a more benign view of Iran than you do. Having said that, it does seem very likely that Iran, just by surviving, will look like it's won.
Oh, yes.
Regime change is tremendously difficult. If you're not going to commit troops on the ground, and you're certainly not going to do the hearts and minds thing, a lesson apparently forgotten from Afghanistan, where the Taliban won hearts and minds village by village and eventually got the whole of the place. If you're not going to do that, then you can bomb things. But when the skies clear and the smoke dissipates, you're left with what you had before, by perhaps a battle-hardened Iran.
Yeah. The other option from that is they weaken the infrastructure, they weaken the, is it called the National Guard, the Islamic Guard, they take out much of the government, and then the people then have an opportunity to rise up. The people in Iran are ready for another revolution, but they've been kept under the thumb. And the state's too large. The Americans can degrade the state to a certain amount. I'm just saying maybe there's a chance that people will take that opportunity and rise up themselves.
Maybe they're just not feeling it. Let's remember in Vietnam, the people turned against the Americans in large part. And if you don't win hearts and minds, you don't win the war. Same goes for Afghanistan. Where can people find out more about your podcasts?
Find me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere else. It's always the same handle, at Nick Buckley MBE. I do daily podcasts, daily videos. I'm always on Twitter. I can't get off Twitter. I love Twitter. And I do a little bit on Facebook as well.
Thanks so much. That is Nick Buckley MBE with his view. Two thoughts for you to finish with. Do go to Limassol. Absolutely lovely. And as far as I can see, unlikely to be bombed to smithereens in the foreseeable future. And secondly, when I was in the airport waiting to fly back, what I could see, and it was quite dramatic, was cancel flight, cancel flight, cancel flight to Tel Aviv. You reap what you sow to an extent in our lives. But when you set a hare running, which is called war, you can never be quite sure how that's going to tail off. And I personally do not think that this will all be over in the next couple of weeks, because Iran's got resilience, and that resilience is the difference between surviving and not surviving. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much indeed to Nick Buckley. More than anything, thanks to you. Please do like and subscribe if you can. Please like and subscribe to Unprecedented TV. It costs you nothing. It's on YouTube, and then you get the full access to all of the archive too. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live here on Unprecedented TV.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.